Have we hit our stride yet on our Lenten journey, now this second week? This morning's Gospel is Matthew's account of the Transfiguration. And every time I hear any of the Transfiguration accounts, I think of my high school physics class and the principle that we learned that what goes up must come down. Jesus and 3 of his apostles went up a high mountain. This is biblical code for encountering God. And indeed, they did encounter him. And it was awesome. It couldn't have been otherwise. An encounter with God is always awesome. And in this case, it was so awesome that Peter, in his impetuous way, wanted to stay there. But no, what goes up must come down. They had to descend the mountain. They had to go back into the world. Though not in the passage we just heard, there are 2 other very important parts of the Transfiguration that we must consider. First, the verse right before what we just heard says that it was 6 days after Jesus announced that he would suffer. So the Transfiguration happens 6 days after Jesus predicted his passion and death and called his disciples to follow him. Second, right after they came down the mountain, they encountered the father of a possessed boy who, though he begged the other disciples to cure him, they couldn't. So Jesus cured the boy and then commented on the little faith of his disciples, the reason they could not cure the boy. Putting this all together then, the Transfiguration is best seen not as a standalone event of God's glory revealed mysteriously in Jesus, but of his glory coupled inseparably with his passion, and involving us, his disciples, to also share in our own transfiguration, involving our own passion, our own suffering, and our own call to a greater conviction of faith, so to reflect God's glory as well. Yes, we too will be transfigured. How does this happen? Through grace, God's gifts to perfect our soul, so that we may conform our life to his will and share in the life of him, to be incorporated into the life of the Trinity. Grace transforms us, and through the power of the Holy Spirit, our soul shines with the reflected glory of God, St. Paul tells us. Grace transfigures us while sin disfigures us. But it's impossible to reach this point of glory, to be transfigured by grace, without suffering. And that means going down the mountain, figuratively following Jesus to Calvary, but in fact, enduring our own many and varied crosses of life. What's more, for our transfiguration to occur, we must be striving to grow ever more deeply in faith, in our relationship with God. It's not enough to be on cruise control in our faith life, thinking that we've arrived and there's no more to do. The disciples at the foot of the mountain may have felt that way, and that's why they fell short in helping the man's son. Jesus' transfiguration, as John Paul II teaches us, marked a decisive moment in his ministry, a revelatory event which strengthened the disciples' faith and prepared them for the tragedy of the cross. In a way, we may see the Transfiguration as a biblical or scriptural root for the sacrament of confirmation. The apostles were confirmed in their faith, and they were graced to endure the inevitable and necessary sufferings to come, eventually even joyfully so. We too, in reflecting upon the Transfiguration, may be reminded of our own confirmation in faith, and perhaps renew our commitment to follow Jesus as a disciple, knowing that we must repeatedly descend the mountains in our life after encountering God in powerful ways, in prayer, in adoration before the Blessed Sacrament, in the sacraments especially of confession and Holy Communion. As we journey through the trials of life, buoyed by God's grace, growing ever more deeply in faith, we become transfigured so to participate ever more in the life of God, reflecting his glory to those around us.